There could be brighter days ahead for the Chicago White Sox, and according to one baseball expert, some of the White Sox rookies aren't just going to be filling out roster spots. They're about to deliver some long-term value.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then. And also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Well, I'm going to get to the Minor League Monday report to discuss how the team's prospects did last week in the Arizona Fall League, along with the prospects who elected free agency. After I talk about the White Sox officially hiring Derek Shomon to be the team's hitting coach and what he's going to bring to the table. But first, let's discuss MLB.com's Jim Callis putting 4 White Sox players among his top 40 rookies who will likely provide long-term value as another reason to have hope. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So long-term value is one of the many things you want to see out of this young core that has emerged out of the 2025 season. I want to see these rookies be productive and not just be flash in the pans. We don't want Gordon Beckhams here. You don't want Yohan Moncada's or Michael Kopech or Eloy Jimenez's. Remember those experiences? All that tantalizing promise, all the possibilities of them being superstars. And what did you get? Just brief glimpses and then nothing but frustration and a lot of losing. I want superstardom for Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teel, Edgar Quero, and Grant Taylor. But I also want them to have overall good to great careers on Chicago's South Side, and hopefully it is long, productive careers on Chicago's South Side. It would be nice if they have, those Mark Burley and Paul Konerko type careers where they get a second contract, maybe even a third. I know, it's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. But you would like to see them not just be, Colson Montgomery, hey, he hit 21 home runs in 71 games in his, first year, but that was the peak. You want the peak to be like every season he has, basically. And that provides us the hope of maybe that better days will come out, especially with this recent ranking that MLB.com's Jim Callis has, because he feels that the White Sox have 4 rookies, Teel, Quero, Montgomery, and Taylor, that are going to be potential long-term value in the league. They're among his top 40 rookies that he put. Hagen Smith, though, did not make the list, but looking at these names of his top 40 names that he has, I got a feeling the angle was players who were ranked in MLB Pipeline's top 100, who graduated from prospect status this season. So I think that's where he was kind of going, although Taylor, I don't think was ever ranked in the top 100 in MLB Pipeline. I know he was in the top 100 and a few others, like I think Baseball Prospectus and Baseball America had him. And I know it was a top 30 prospect. I think Shane Smith was very briefly, a top 30 prospect for the White Sox when they drafted him. But, I think his exclusion, if he is excluding Smith because maybe he wasn't top 100 or, again, top 30, that's a darn shame because his arsenal of pitches does give him the chance to be an ace. And I talked about it on many, many episodes. I mean, Smith is already a dude status, in my opinion. If he makes a few adjustments, he could be an ace. So I think that's a guy that I would have put in my top 40. But if it was pretty much, hey, these are, guys that were in MLB Pipeline's top 100, regulars in the top 100, or again, regulars in like teams top 10, then I get why he would have excluded Smith. But otherwise, Callis is high on Montgomery. He ranks him 7th ahead of Roki Sasaki and Jacob Mizorowski, and 1 spot behind Marcelo Mayer. So he's in some pretty good company there. Now, I think for Colson to have that long-term value, it has to come by obviously hitting 30 to 45 home runs a season. If he can be that stud masher that this White Sox team desperately needs, that's where the long-term value is. Now, I would also, again, like him to diversify his hit profile a bit to have, a decent average. I mean, I'm not sure he's ever going to hit over 280. And really, as I've kept saying, as we keep diving more and more into the saber metrics and the advanced metrics and looking at the numbers, average is nice, but it's not the be-all, end-all like it used to be. I mean, it's more, again, OPS. Are you either getting on base or doing damage? Because, again, a walk or a single is the same thing. You're on first base. The only time a hit really, really matters, in my opinion, is with runners in scoring position. So that's where I would like to see Colson also diversify, be better at hitting with runners in scoring position. But if he can spray some more doubles when he's not hitting dingers, maybe again those timely singles with runners in scoring position, I think he could be a 260 hitter. But Mixon taking more walks, cutting down on the Ks, he could be that 850 to 900 OPS hitter. And that's where you want him to be. If he's, a 900 OPS hitter, 125 to 130 WRC plus, and, he's hitting 30 to 45 home runs, that is going to be a lot of value for the White Sox. And then you got to hope the defense he showed was not an anomaly, but actually the real defensive shortstop that the organization thinks he can be with his long frame. Because remember, a lot of, scouts were saying, oh, he's got to go to third base. He's just not going to be able to field the position effectively. And he was flashing some serious leather. So if he can do all that, yeah, you've got some long-term value there. Teel checks in at 11, one spot behind Braves catcher Drake Baldwin and one spot ahead of the Cubs rookie Matt Shaw. Now, Teel may end up, I think, actually being the better overall hitter than Montgomery with his ability to hit for power and hit for average. But I do think Montgomery's going to hit way more home runs. I think Teal's going to be more of a 20 to 25 home run guy. But again, I could see him having the better average and the better OBP and sometimes challenging Colson for the team lead in OPS. Because again, I think Colson's OPS is going to be mostly made up of his slug. If he can be in that 450 to 500 range, that is going to be huge for the White Sox. And then a decent on-base percentage where, Teel, you're looking for the more overall. But he has to improve defensively as a catcher. Now, the framing is not going to be a huge priority with the challenge system going into effect. The only time framing is, I think, really, really going to matter is if both teams have blown, or if the opposing team has blown their two challenges that they get, then yeah, framing matters. But if they keep getting their challenges right, you could try to trick the umpire. All the hitter has to do is challenge it. So that type of stuff. But the blocking the balls in the dirt, pop time, caught stealing, all need to go up. Quero, he checked in at 26, and I think that's appropriate. The bat-to-ball skills, they're there. We've seen it. And I can see him always sporting a 260 to 280 average. But he's got to get better at driving the ball. The power he showed in the minors just was not there when he got the promotion to the majors. And I think part of that was he was just trying to adjust to all the things he had to do as a rookie catcher, and he's 22. But you do need him to crush the ball a bit more. And he's got to hit better with runners in scoring position. That has to get better. I did many episodes during the season about how he just has to get better in those clutch situations, especially with two outs. But I think those areas, he can get better. I mean, the square up percentage was in the league's 95th percentile per Baseball Savant. And he also had a slightly above average when it came to hard hit percentage. So he just has to get better at, I think, barreling up the ball and launching it. And again, the ABS challenge system, that's going to minimize his terrible framing rating. His pop time is near average. His blocks is around there too, but the caught stealing, that needs to get better as well. And if those three can reach their long-term value that Callis is thinking, then the White Sox have a chance to have three impactful bats in the lineup every day, with Teel and Quero just alternating at catcher and DH. Then Grant Taylor came in at 31st. Taylor's going to be interesting to see where his value is going to come from. Will it be as a starter or a closer, high leverage reliever? And he was on 670s inside the clubhouse, I think 2 Saturdays back, where he had an interesting take on why he's actually fine with either role. He likes relief because he was basically saying he can rely on his bread and butter pitches, but he wouldn't mind starting a try because of the, needing to mix in your whole arsenal to getting hitters out. But I'm always going to maintain his arm is going to dictate what role he'll have. To me, even though they did lose the wild card series, seeing what Mason Miller did to shut down the Cubs, I wouldn't mind seeing Taylor being like a Mason Miller. And I know the Brewers had the same decision with Josh Hader. But again, it's going to be what his arm dictates. Well, Derek Shomon will be in charge with helping Colson, Kyle, and Edgar reach their potential as he was officially named the team's hitting coach Friday afternoon. Let's discuss what he brings to the table after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. And it keeps watching every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money, or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. So you think Chicago can ride this hot start, all the way to the Central Divisional title? Well, that is currently at plus 1,900. So even if you put as little as $5 on that, and if it somehow happens, that's going to pay out at $95. Maybe you're more realistic and you want to build a parlay of Chicago making the play-in game and having over 40 wins this season like they normally do. Well, that is at plus 231, so there's a chance at least to double your money. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins, so head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe at wherever you get your podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. Well, Derek Shomon was officially introduced as the team's hitting coach a few days after Sox Machine's James Fegan broke the news. It took a couple of days. I think they just probably wanted to arrange, when could he, do his introductory press conference. I think they were also trying to make sure that they got everything tied up with some of the other hires that they had. I know they wanted to give Zach Bove maybe his day in the sun as the team's new pitching coach, but he is now officially in the fold. And Shomon meets the meatball requirement as he grew up in Glenview, Illinois, and he discussed being a huge White Sox fan in 2005 during his introductory press conference. So definitely fulfills the Chicago guy requirement that you need for it seems like every Chicago team, you got to have someone with ties to Chicago. So there he is. And while getting a coach from Miami may not seem like a franchise you want to tap into, he was part of a hitting coaching staff that was one of the best hitting teams in baseball with runners in scoring position. And that is a huge area the White Sox offense has to get better at. And also, it sounds like the work Shomon did with Kyle Stowers is exactly what you want out of the team's hitting coach, and that is to help hitting director Ryan Fuller develop bats at the big league level. Because remember, top down, Fuller is in charge of the team's hitting. And it seems like that was a huge emphasis in the press conference, that Ryan Fuller's in charge. He's the hitting guy from complex league to the big leagues, but he can't be everywhere all the time. So you need that hitting coach to assist in the development of the young hitters at the big league level. And you also need him to make sure every hitter is prepared to face the opposing pitcher that they are facing that day. And also, if he can provide guidance to help the Sox finish 4th in average with runners in scoring position and 8th in slug in RISP, that's going to go a long way, because the White Sox were 28th in average and 29th in slug with runners in scoring position. Chicago is going nowhere if the lineup can't do better with runners in scoring position. I don't know how many shows I did over the summer, as everydayers you might recall, talking about, man, this team just cannot hit with runners in scoring position. Man, this team cannot get runs across the plate when they get a man on second. They just can't produce. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in terms of what can Derek Shomon help the White Sox in. Can he make sure the lineup is prepared? Meaning, again, and the best way to look at it is a team being aggressive against pitchers that you need to be aggressive against? Because there are some pitchers that they're going to throw their, either their mistake or the pitch that you can hit or a hittable pitch early in the count. You kind of just got to jump on them. Every team does that. I mean, look at what the Brewers did to the Cubs in the NLDS. I think, what is it? They jumped on Shota, I believe, early. So, you got to jump on these guys sometimes. But sometimes you got to be patient, and you just can't be out there free swinging it because, again, some of these pitchers, it might be the old, especially starters, it might be the old cliche. First at bat, you're just looking to see what it is. Second at bat, getting the timing. Third at bat, that's where you're going to look to do damage. But you just want to make sure that these guys are prepared, that there's a game plan, and that they're going to execute the game plan. And it is a marathon, and that's where it can be tough for even a hitting coach to implement, because you got to do that 162 times. But most importantly, can he help boost the team's RASP? Can he get these guys to understand, here's what we need to do in these situations? Now, he did also spend time in the Twins organization. And again, that's a solid hitting organization. So that's why I'm not, upset that they went with him. I thought they might have gone with somebody with more ties to Will Venable, especially when he was at Texas in 2023, when they were just slugging the heck out of the ball. But it sounds like this was a collaborative effort with GM Chris Getz and Venable. Both, had him on their lists when they were going over names. That's what Getz said during the press conference. And one thing that stood out, though, is it feels like Fuller, again, is in charge of the overall hitting, but they're looking for Shomon to help in the development at the big league level and with hitting with runners in scoring position. And Kyle Storrs, who had a great season in Miami, basically is credited that to Shomon. So he's got a track record of getting the best out of, developing players. And this is a nugget from what Kyle Williams, the Chicago Sun-Times White Sox beat reporter, wrote. Quote, "We felt like we needed someone who was fully aligned with Ryan and fit into the system," Getz said. "It was crystal clear that Derek was a great fit for that, and Sherman as an addition." Sherman, side note, was the minor league hitting role. I already talked about him I think 2 weeks ago. And Sherman as an addition in the minor league hitting role was also going to be able to carry out what Ryan had put in place and allowing everyone to go out there and accomplish things, end quote. "Being able to connect with young players will be key for Shomon, as the White Sox will be relying on multiple young players, Kyle Teel, Colson Montgomery, and Chase Maidroth, to contribute offensively." Quote, "We know that we want to accomplish two main things," Getz said. "One is having a very clear idea of what the challenge is and what the solution is. We know that solutions are going to be different for each hitter, but just having a very clear idea and a well-presented demonstration of what each pitcher is going to challenge our hitters with, and being able to have a creative practice design to follow up on that and be able to challenge those things in real time," end quote. Shomon said he learned in Miami about, quote, "upping the training environment," end quote. "He wants to make everything as game-like as possible. He saw similarities between the Sox and Marlins in terms of roster composition. Now it's on Shomon to help the White Sox improve with runners in scoring position and situational hitting. The Marlins finished fourth in NL in batting average with runners in scoring position, 275. He's the Sox sixth full-time hitting coach since Greg Walker in 2011. Now, if these young hitters can produce and the team can be in the top 5 of hitting with runners in scoring position, I think Shomon then has a chance to be the team's hitting coach for a while." Well, the White Sox sent a couple of prospects to the Arizona Fall League All-Star Game, also known as the Fall Star Game, and are losing some prospects who elected free agency. And let's discuss that after the break. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. I love zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcast, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. Mine was pretty low key. My daughter had a couple of play dates, so she was just all over the place, ripped up my house. We had toys everywhere. But, I feel like, again, this is like the only corner for those watching on YouTube that is like mine. The rest of the house is now basically my daughter's, where she has all her toys and the dogs, the pup that I got. Otherwise, watch the Bears pull off that incredible comeback victory. And again, hopefully you had a fun weekend. Well, the White Sox got 3 prospects onto the American League Fall Stars roster. That's kind of what they call the All-Star game for the Arizona Fall League. Nice little play on words there. Hagen Smith, Sam Antonacci, and Braden Montgomery got the nod. Braden Montgomery was a late addition as they kind of have that also, that little late vote, kind of what they have with the All-Star game as well. He got voted in because, again, he didn't have the at-bats to probably officially qualify, as he missed the first 2 weeks, I believe, with that foot injury. Antonacci actually drove in the game-winning run in extra innings with a sac fly. He did a really nice job of avoiding the Gatorade bath, so good for him on avoiding getting soaked, as everybody was celebrating for him hitting the RBI sac fly. Now, these 3 getting the recognition is nice to see, as these are 3 players that can help this team get back to being competitive. Sam Antonacci obviously would be more of a raised floor player, where Smith and Montgomery you are counting on to be superstar players. This organization, though, did lose some depth, as the franchise had a couple of guys that were, some prospects or veterans that were on minor league contracts that were eligible to elect free agency. They did, but these are guys you're not going to miss, and I'll go over why you're not going to miss them in a second. But back to Smith, Braden Montgomery, and Sam Antonacci. I really hope that they can carry this positive momentum that they're having at the Arizona Fall League into spring training. Have good starts to the minor league season, because I doubt they're going to break spring training on the opening day roster. And again, I'm not a huge fan of having your top prospects break spring training. I mean, unless they just absolutely destroyed in spring training on opening day. One of the reasons is I think that pressure to get that first hit is just immense, and to impress, it can be so immense. And you kind of, I remember covering Prince Fielder, like he went 0 for 21, and he finally got his first hit on like this bloop single. But everybody during the 0 for 21 is like, is he a bust? Is he going to be a bust? And you saw the career he went on to. But during that time, it was just like nervous for everybody. And it just took this bloop single, and then obviously he went. But I think, he would have had an easier landing. And I know he had a brief debut the year before, but it was still just like, what, it was like a week he was with the team. But then coming up, there was just this huge pressure on him, where I think if you kind of give, a prospect like Braden Montgomery or Hagen Smith their own day, I think it's a better chance for them to shine. And I like the idea of having them their own day, where opening day, it's for everybody, the pageantry, that type of stuff. But in terms of Antonacci, getting up by midseason, he's got a couple of paths. If Chase Maidroth is producing at the plate, then you don't need to rush Antonacci. But if the White Sox don't make a free agent addition at first base, or say that player is doing well, like say they do sign Rhys Hoskins and he does a good job at first base, that he can be flipped at the trade deadline, or he's terrible and you got to DFA him, well, then you might need Miguel Vargas to man first base regularly. And that could open things up for Antonacci to make his case to be on the big league roster, especially if Curtis Mead does absolutely nothing. But the reason I prefer Antonacci to be at second base is just that lack of pop. Now, he hit his 3rd home run of the Arizona Fall League last week, but I think he's, I believe he's going to be more of like a 10 to 15 home run guy, more of a bat to ball skills guy, might be better than Chase Maidroth. Again, that's why I've said it's going to be a huge season for Chase Maidroth, because I think Sam Antonacci just might be better. So Chase Maidroth has to prove that he can produce better to keep, Antonacci off his heels. But, you're never going to say no to a bat to ball player in the White Sox lineup. You need about 3 of those guys. So if you had Antonacci and Maidroth constantly getting on base with singles and, drawing walks, awesome. But again, when you go to traditional, you do want more power out of the corner spots. But either way, he has a path, so you want to see him keep this momentum going. Hagen Smith, he got out of a second inning jam in the Fall Star game with 2 Ks. And again, if he can if he can get back on track from that up and down minor league season that he had this past year, it's going to be huge for the team's future. And Braden Montgomery, he's got that potential to be better than Colson, Kyle Teel, and Edgar Quero. Now, the White Sox are likely going to lose some organizational depth as some of those minor leaguers eligible for free agency did elect it. Although I'm not going to miss Owen White, Elvis Bergoglio, Vinny Capra, or Caleb Freeman. I mean, I was fine with them kicking on the tires with a guy like Owen White, former second-round pick. But, they weren't really they didn't show much when they were given an opportunity. Because those were the players that made the big league level this past season and decided, okay, I'm going to try to find a different opportunity. Now, Freeman just getting to the majors is a huge win for the scouting team staff based on his draft status. He was a low pick. I think he was like an 18th round pick or even an undrafted free agent, if I recall. But, so just him getting to the big leagues, massive. But he was getting rocked. So the moment I saw that, I was like, yeah, this ain't going to work out. This ain't going to be a, late round guy that somehow finds his way into the rotation. I mean, into the bullpen. But hey, good for him getting to the show. That is always a big win for a scouting staff when any of your late round picks can make it to the show. Bergoglio and White, they were just, they were two pitchers worth kicking the tires on, but it just didn't work out. Now, other prospects that are departing are probably going to be departing because the elective free agency, and usually teams do not bring those guys back, and usually those guys do not want to come back. The reason why they're electing free agency is to find opportunities with other organizations. Their pitchers, Joseph Yabor, I think he was actually a Rule 5 draft for the Mets that the White Sox took in the minor league round. Fran Rivera's, Andrew Dahlquist, Max Roberts, Kyle Tyler, Dalton Roach, and Evan McKendry. Catcher Luis Pineda, second baseman Andre Lipsius, and outfielder DJ Gladney. And then catcher Blake Sobel was released. So again, that goes back to, do the White Sox need to add a veteran catcher to have depth at AAA? And I think they do. I think they should sign a veteran on a minor league deal with a non-roster invite, and then hopefully he's amicable to working at AAA. But they've lost a little bit of catching depth here. But these are these are guys the team can replace with next draft class, current draft class that they had. You can replace them with non-roster invites. Andre Lipsius, he actually had a decent season at AAA, but I agree with him electing free agency because he just never got called up. And if you can't get called up on the White Sox, you might be wanting to rethink, is it even worth riding these buses anymore? I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Lipsius. It's just, this guy's been a career minor leaguer, had a couple of coffees, but he could not even crack an opportunity with even Chase Mydroth hurt. I mean, they gave Vinny Capra a chance. So for him, I don't blame him for being like, I did much better at AAA Charlotte, and I didn't even get one single opportunity, man. I know Andrew Dahlquist, there was some hype around him potentially being a good reliever, but again, they've got some depth. You can draft his replacement very easily. So these are guys that you're not going to totally miss. You wish them well. Maybe they latch on with another team. Maybe there's an opportunity there. If they do become something, though, this is not going to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe this organization let these guys go. These are guys that the White Sox can easily replace, in the offseason with those non-roster invites. And again, easily replace in the 2026 draft. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with your mailbag questions and comments, so make sure to get them in via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Or again, you can leave your questions or comments on the YouTube page. And again, you can leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @ToddJDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel @Locked On White Sox, however you get your audio-only podcast. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.